All right, we are broadcasting live. My name is Jeff Moore, and I'm hosting our Recruiter Tips and Tricks first live Hangout on air with my friends Brian and Alice from the Mountain View office, where we're talking about preparing your resume. And what I wanted to do first was let Brian and Alice introduce themselves to everybody real quick, and then we'll jump into the content.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. So my name is Brian Kaminsky. I've been at Google for about 4.5 years, and I work on the university programs team in the non-engineering group. Our team visits campuses, and we also work with a lot of students on some of our internal programs. So programs here on campus, our internship program, our Bold internship, as well as some of our other programs, a program for high school seniors called Symposium, and our immersion program, which is for freshmen and gives them a week in Google and helps them understand what's going on. So our team works on all of that. We see a lot of resumes, and we try and find them good roles at Google for both full-time and their internship roles.
And people can find information about that at the google.com/students site?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Alice?
Wonderful. So I actually work directly with Brian. He works on the programs end of things, and I work on the in-house recruiting end of things on the college team located in Mountain View. And I deal with a variety of master's, bachelor's, and PhD new grads.
Mostly on the software engineering side of the house?
Yes, correct.
Awesome. Cool. So what I thought we'd talk about today is a little bit about resume preparation, and if you're a new grad or a student who's sort of new to their job search, what do folks like us look for in resumes? And when I did the original blog post discussion, I sort of talked on a few things that I really like to see. I tell people to really focus on their strengths, so really show what's great about you. What is it that you've done that you're really proud of? Make sure that stuff sort of pops. And then also to really take and dig deep into the details. And so rather than saying, oh, I wrote this application in Java, getting into a lot of detail, oh, I wrote this multi-threaded application, really get into the detail so that when a resume screener or a recruiter or a hiring manager looks at your resume, they don't have to wonder what you did. You've told them what they do. And then, of course, just to sort of flip around and be funny about it, I also tell people to keep it short. So, the 15-page resume is not such a good idea. We like to see, a page, maybe two, that's thorough but not a novel. Spelling errors, stuff like that. Make sure that you've spell checked it and grammar checked it and it all makes sense. And then know your target, right? If you're writing an objective, make sure your objective is targeted to the people you're replying to. And that when someone opens the resume or looks at the cover letter or whatever, they're not going to say, why is this person sending this to me? They're going to open it up and say, wow, this is a great fit for my team. And so that was just sort of my quick thoughts in the blog. And Brian, I would love to hear your take first, especially from a non-eng side of things. What sort of things pop for a resume for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I always think of resumes is that it's a really short opportunity to make a great first impression. One of the ways that I've always thought is that you think of it like an ad, but instead of an ad for a product or a service, it's really an ad for you. It's something that's going to go ahead and meet the needs of the person that's looking at it, and they're going to want to make you more and get to know you a little bit better. It should be something that's short, should be something that's concise, and it should help educate the reader how you're a perfect fit for the role in their team, kind of like what you were saying. We usually like to see them around a page, especially for students right out of college. We just find that that's a whole lot easier to filter to the different groups that we work with. And we also really like to see them focused on the actions and not necessarily just job descriptions. We see a lot of students that talk about what their job description was as a president or a treasurer, but that's really consistent across the board. Where you start to differentiate yourself is when you can start talking about the impact you had and the roles the things that you actually did while you were there to set yourself apart from anyone else that was in it before you or after you. So I think those are kind of some of the things that we like to look at. The other thing that we really like to see in terms of a resume is some sort of a target for it. We all have had a lot of different experiences in our lives, so it's a matter of kind of taking some time, sitting back and thinking, how does it all loop together? Where does that kind of put you in a particular direction? As opposed to, I'm just going to put down everything that I did at every company and hope that somehow that'll fit. Those are actually the hardest resumes for us to look at, because our role is to find a good role for you at Google or any company where we think you're going to be most successful. And so if you can kind of help us along that way and kind of do some of that groundwork, that makes it a lot easier for us.
Now, Brian, do you like to see a lot of metrics and data in there too? Or are you not as much of a stickler with that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I think anytime that you can quantify something to show what your impact was and why it made a difference and how significant that difference was, I think that really helps, because that really gives us kind of a basis for comparison, that we can see people that have made a really significant impact versus people that maybe just did one or two things and they had the same title in the organization. So anytime that you can quantify something, and so, the numbers are great when you can do it, but even just thinking about why did whatever you did, why did it matter, how did it make a difference or an impact, and be able to talk about that, I think, is really important.
Right. And Alice, what do you look for? I mean, you and I are from the same little world, so I would love to hear your thoughts.
Right. So going off of what Brian said, I think a resume is a quick way to basically make an impression on an engineer, a recruiter, whoever's taking a quick look at that resume. So it does need to be short and concise. I'd say 1 page probably for most undergrads. PhDs would probably be a couple pages depending on how many publications you have, and I think that's probably the difference. On the engineering end of things, I say don't spend up too much time worrying about objective and things like that. If it's for a software role, go ahead and just say that, or for an engineering role. Engineers are really just interested in the technical, right? They want to look exactly at your work experience. I think quantitative was a really important thing to mention. How many lines of code did you write in this project or in your internship project? What languages did you use? And also, to state your skills, but also know that the engineers on this side of the fence reading your resume, if you put expert in Python, right, we're going to expect you to be an expert on it. So be, honest about your skill set.
Right.
And I think really in general, stick to the technical. What they're looking at is, are there enough positive indicators to show us that you're going to have what it takes basically to get through our interview process, right? So whether that's a combination of work experience, maybe just some meaty, classroom projects, maybe you've just been filling with things online or in open source, all of those things count. Maybe you've taken some really tough classes in your university that are known for being really, really hard. It's really a combination of all of those things, but for the end, I always say, stick to the technical, get right to the point. Engineers are the ones reading your resumes, right? So show them exactly what they want to see.
So just on the same vein, what's the one thing, Alice, we'll start with you, that you don't like to see? Like, what's something that not that. The one thing that jumps off the page at you?
Right. I think for engineering roles, I enjoy, I saw a couple questions that, that were coming in about hobbies and leadership. That's definitely wonderful. But, in what way would it, bolster your file as an actual software engineer, right? Is it because you have great communication skills, or what actually you're trying to list instead of just listing all these hobbies or listing all these positions or awards? Sometimes a little explanation of why they're relevant is also really helpful versus just, listing a laundry list of awards and accomplishments without any context, I think.
Right, absolutely. And Brian, what do you have over there for?
Yeah, so I think it's a little different on the non-engineering side, because it's a little bit more challenging to get some of that specific work experience. So I think one of the things that we will see from time to time is when people focus heavily on their paid work experience and forget about all the other stuff that they do during their college experience that should count for relevant role-related expertise. So if you're looking for like a sales role or a recruiting role or an advertising role, think about all those clubs and student organizations where you've really made a difference and made an impact. You may not have been paid for it, but you could have gotten and developed just as many skills from that and made just as much of an impact from those types of roles compared to some of the roles where you're maybe a student monitor. And I think it's great to have those work experiences on there, but in terms of a resume, it should really be prioritized towards the roles that you're looking for. And so when you can arrange your experience, I don't think it needs to necessarily be in terms of kind of like the paid experience before the student organization experience. It's whatever the stuff is most relevant to the role, I think is the stuff that we want to see first. Because in that page, you've got a limited amount of time, and depending on who looks at your resume, spend a different amount of time looking at it. You really want those impactful experiences to really pop out on the resume, as opposed to be buried down at the bottom where somebody might not get to them.
Right. Cool. So we're about halfway through our live hangout, talking about interview prep and resume prep, and just wanted to sort of at the halfway marker, anybody that's chiming in late, to remind them that we are live on the air talking about resume preparation. And at the halfway point, I wanted to flip things a little bit. We've had a lot of questions come in through our online moderator page, which is awesome. And for anybody out there listening that wants to submit additional questions, either for this conversation or future ones, you can find the link on the blog and on the website. So we'd love more questions. But I thought we'd just kick a few of these out there and talk through them, and see what you guys have to say, and go from there. One, and Alice, this is going to be right in your wheelhouse. It says, should I include years of coding for a particular language, or should I just list myself as proficient? I mean, sort of how much detail do you like there for somebody? I know you talked about it a little bit, but a little bit more. This is for Mike, sent this one.
Great. I think that's a great question. In terms of languages, I always say list them in order of proficiency if possible, right? I mean, we should understand that your first language or the first OS that you list should be kind of your strongest suit. I think if you want to list yours, that's fantastic. It gives us a gauge on, hey, this candidate has been programming, since he was in high school versus, obviously he picked this up in the classroom during his college courses, and I think that's a big difference, right? And also, years also help us indicate, yes, he listed that he's touched 4 languages, but really, his area of strength is Java or C++ or C. That way the interviewer can appropriately focus their questions to your strengths, right? And we don't want to test you on something you're not familiar with. I think that's the bottom line. There's no point in that. We want to test you on the area that you're strongest. So I think as much detail you can give on years of experience is great, just because the words like proficient and expert have various meanings, right, depending on if you're an expert at the college level or an expert in the industry. So years, I think, is a great indicator for new grads.
Yeah, and I think, and Brian, I will love your take too. I think that, I personally sort of counsel people away from doing the laundry list. Mm-hmm. I used BASIC in college. Do I put BASIC on my resume? Absolutely not. Nobody wants me coding anything. And, same with sort of non-technical skills, right? Like it's some accounting classes during my master's degree. Do I want to do accounting? No. Does anybody want to do accounting? No. And so making sure that those kinds of things are sort of, put properly. And Brian, do you have any sort of tip on that same kind of vein for folks?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It goes around to kind of those two concepts of both prioritization and relevance. Mm-hmm. For us, thinking about terms of, okay, what are the relevant skills for this particular role or area or opportunity? And some of that means that you're going to have to leave some stuff off. With a page or maybe a little bit more than that, you've got a very limited amount of space there. So thinking about what's going to be the best stuff that's going to really speak to somebody, and what's the stuff that I'm not going to be afraid to get a question about in an interview. The last thing that you want to do is put something on your resume that says, I'm fluent in German. Well, if I happen to read that resume and interview you, I spent a year in Germany, I took the language for several years, I may ask you a question in it. And if you're not comfortable answering back, then we run into challenges there along the way, because you really want to accurately portray your skill set for somebody. The other point that I just wanted to make about that is, there's a lot of opportunities, or a lot of things that you see around additional skills that people will put on their resume. And the thing that you see the most is like, I can send emails, or maybe I can, to some extent, use spreadsheets and Microsoft Office products or anything like that, Google Apps even to some extent. And we kind of expect that at this point. A lot of us, grew up with computers. You see young students right now that have tablets at the age of 9. I mean, we expect sort of that. So if you're looking for areas where you can save some space, that's a really, really good way to leave a line or two off, because we just kind of assume that that's going to be there.
Right. Don't state the obvious. Absolutely. Cool. So we have a lot of questions, which is really great. And so I've got another one that I think is kind of an interesting one that I hadn't thought about. And this is from John Livingston in Savannah, Georgia. What up, Georgia? This is, do I need a website resume in addition to a paper one? Now I could make the joke of who has a paper one, right? I don't think I've made a paper copy of my resume in ages. But I mean, what do you guys think? Do you need to have like a personal website that's got a link to your resume, or is a LinkedIn account enough, or what do you guys think? Alice, I'll start with you.
I think if you have a personal website or want to have one, that's fantastic, only because it's another avenue if an interviewer is interested that we can look up your work, right? You can list your projects. A lot of students have student sites, which is fantastic. Is it necessary to get a job at Google? Absolutely not. We've hired people who have a couple lines on their resume, right? They go through the interview process, and that's all they needed. But I think a personal website is a great way to show additional depth into your background. So if you have the time to do it, it definitely doesn't hurt. Especially, think about it, it's a Google, we're an online company, right? We like to see what you're doing online, especially, in this area. So any effort you can put in that, I think, is fantastic.
Brian, you agree?
Yeah, I definitely, I think, a resume is that one-page ad for you. With any ad, there's opportunities to get more information. If that's one of the things that you have the time and the skills to put together, I think that really does show some of the other things that you can potentially do. Do you need it? Absolutely not. Focus on that resume, that great, give somebody a reason to want to learn a little bit more. That can come from, your web page. That also comes from an interview and those conversations that you have from there. So, as long as the resume looks good, that's your first impression in. If there's additional information that you can link to or help with the reviewers or the interviewers or anyone else that's looking at it, that's awesome too. But like Alice was saying, it's the same for the non-engineering side. Definitely not required.
Awesome. Cool.
But it is a way for us to find you, correct? That's how Googlers find a lot of potential candidates, is actually from their personal website. So something to keep in mind.
All right, so we're going to jump in. We've got a few more questions here. And for anybody joining late, this is just a reminder. This is Jeff, Alice, and Brian broadcasting live through Google Hangouts, talking about resume preparation. I'm going to go international just because, we're international. We've got a question here from Mario in Croatia, which is awesome. What up, Europe? And he says, I've worked on a number of website projects for businesses over the years. Some of them went out of business. Should I list them as well since I can't link to them anymore externally? Now, I would say yes, absolutely. Maybe we can find a cached version, all those kinds of things. But, at the same time, I think I would recommend you prioritize over other work you've done. If the best work you've done has gone out of business, I think you want to talk about it. If the worst work you've done has gone out of business and then your best stuff is still out there, maybe you don't want to talk about that stuff. But, I would love to see what you guys think, too. Brian, you can kick it off.
Yeah, we don't, with college students, you don't necessarily see all that many companies that have gone out of business that find their way onto resume lines. But I think it's always important, as long as it's something that's going to be kind of supportive, it's going to be supportive of you and tell a little bit more of your story, I think it's important to put that on there. If you know it's out of business and that comes up in the interview, you can definitely talk about it and what your role was there, what impact you made, and then, if some things have happened after you left, that's kind of the way things go. There are a lot of big companies out there that have since gone out of business, and I can't, or even small ones. And I think a lot of people would say, I was very happy with my time that I was there. If you were part of the team that was there when everything closed down, then you probably got a pretty good story about what you've learned along the way. So I think all of that adds to your experience and what you bring as a candidate. So definitely talk about it.
Absolutely. Alice, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's necessarily so much, the title of where you worked versus the impact. I think a lot of new grads will list things like I was the owner of my self-made startup, right? Or me and a couple of my friends put together this website. And what we're looking for is, what did you actually do, right? Did you write this small tool, in the open source community? What languages did you use? That's what's most important to us on the engineering end. So I don't think it's too big of a deal if the company's out of business. You could still tell us what you did.
Right, absolutely. Cool. All right, let me look at some more questions here. We have so many, which is awesome. Thank you all who submitted, even those of you that don't get that don't get answered. It's actually a really awesome question from Johan in France, and hopefully Johan's listening. Keeping it European over here. Is it a good idea to put a QR code instead of a picture? What do you guys think about QR codes on resumes? We could all whip out our smartphones and be all cool about it, but, Alice, what do you think?
I think it's a very classically googly thing to do. If it links to your own personal website, wonderful. I'm sure a couple engineers, if they see it, would hold up their phone and scan it in. It's not necessary, but I don't think it would hurt at all. I think it would only be a pro.
I have a QR code on the back of my business card. It's a good piece of conversation. If nothing else, it gives you another way that somebody can access your information. And if it links to just a electronic version of that website, maybe that's something that gets saved by someone who looks at it. Whether that's somebody like me looking at it, or whether that's you have it, or even if you can just pull it up and say, here, scan the QR code that's on my phone, and that links to the resume. If you meet somebody talking about in like some sort of a networking event or another thing, it's a quick way to access your information. You might not always have a paper copy, and it's something that's out there. So it's an opportunity. There's all kinds of cool stuff with technology. So being a tech company, we enjoy when people have sort of interesting and different ways of giving us that information.
Yeah, I think I want to just add one sort of cautionary tale on the QR code. Like, if you're doing a resume, I think I would probably recommend people not just send in a QR code and nothing else, or just like, hey, I rock. Here's my QR code. Like, okay, that's great. I think that kind of thing is really a helpful sort of addition to a traditional resume, or a supplement, so to speak, as opposed to a substitute. I certainly have seen people send in quote resumes. It's just a link to like something else. Like, okay, I don't know what this link is. So I think you want to be a little cautionary tale on that one. Cool. And, so I guess we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got one question here that I think actually wraps up the conversation really well. And so unfortunately, we're not going to get to take any live questions this Hangout. Hopefully we can get through a few tomorrow. But, for anybody joining late, again, we are broadcasting live via Google Hangouts, talking about resume preparation. Last one, Brian, we're going to start with you, and I'm going to hold you guys to this one, is if you had 5 essential qualities that make a good resume, what would they be? And that was from Von de Silva in Switzerland, so keeping it European. Apparently all the West Coast students are still in bed.
That'll happen. It's still a break for a lot of them. So 5 of them. Well,
you got 5.
All right. Well, my 5 would be first and most important is that your resume focuses on the impact you've had. I think that's really the key part, is that it tells what you've done and how you've made a difference. The second thing is that it talks about your actions, what you actually did there, and not what your job description was or what you were supposed to do. Because again, like I said earlier, we see a lot of consistency in terms of titles, but we want to know how you were different across the board. Third on there is that it should be concise, that you get to the point and that you're very clear about what you're trying to convey. The fourth one that I would say is that it's well structured, that you break it into logical areas, whatever that works for you. And then the last thing that I would say is that you prioritize it, because from the top to the bottom, left to the right, you look for the information that you're most interested in at the time, and then as you go down each area or each bullet point, then you look for a little bit more. Some people may never get to that last line of your resume. That's disappointing, but that's sometimes the way it goes. They may look at just the first 2 big sections of it, or they may look at just 1 or 2 bullets from each section. So just being aware of the fact that everybody looks at it a little differently, and lead with the most important stuff. So those would be my 5.
Awesome. Alice? Besides coding, and more coding.
That's going to be a tough one to follow. I know this one's a little obvious, but since we get resumes from all around the world, and that's what makes Google great, I would say make sure when you apply to any company that your resume is in that language of whatever office you're applying to. In general, it'd be nice if most resumes can be translated to English for Google, just because we are based in Mountain View. It just takes a couple extra seconds for a recruiter to translate it, but keep in mind, you want to provide all that information up front and make it easy, right? For new grads, I always say make your education obvious, because a lot of times people will list the university and some kind of grad date, but we can't actually tell what degree program they're in, or if they've continued on through their master's, when their planned graduation date is. So keep that pretty obvious, because there are different processes for different types of grads at Google, intern versus full-time, for example. I think for software, I always say show me as much information as possible that demonstrates that you have strong CS fundamentals. That's kind of the number one thing we look for at Google, in addition to coding skills, in addition to great communication and problem-solving skills. But like I said, it is, we are a technical company. Show us, what are examples of strong CS fundamentals? Is it the grades you got in these classes? Is it the work experiences? Is it the cool things you've done in your basement, hacking on the Android platform? Show us examples of that. The last thing, for the engine of things is really just to keep it technical, right? I keep reminding students, don't bother with lengthy objective statements and things like that. Engineers are reading it. They want to take a quick glance and see, is your experience relevant to what we're doing at Google, right? Is he worth a phone interview or an on-site interview or a phone call? So keep it as technical and to the point as possible. And I don't think that's 5, but I think that wraps up my end of things.
All right, so I lied. We're going to take 2 more questions, just to keep you guys on your toes. And I just wanted to add one point on that, the 5 things for resume. I mean, I think, Brian, you mentioned it, the making your best things show. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of whatever your best attribute, your best experience, whether it's, I went to MIT, or I went to wherever, or I worked at Google, whatever your best attribute is, ought to pop right on the top, because if you've got one chance, I want to see that best thing. So we've got 2 more quick questions, and we're going to hit them really quick, because I know you guys have got other meetings today, too, and I really appreciate you being here with me. First one, what are some resume red flag mistakes that people make? And that one's from Greg. I'm just going to say, myself on that one, like atrocious spelling errors. Like that one just kills me, and it's always like, ugh. Because even if I don't catch it, somebody else does, and invariably someone else is like, this person said I have great attention to detail, and they spelled attention wrong. Like, so that's sort of my big one.
And Jeff, you're right on that. That's not necessarily mine, the one that I will look at, but it's amazing how in some ways that can be something that somebody will look at, and that'll totally shape their impression of a candidate. So, I mean, anything that you can do to kind of avoid that is really, really helpful. One thing that I would always say is, take your resume and read it out loud, and read it backwards, word by word, so that you spot some of those weird things, and then give it to a friend and have them ask them to do the same thing, because eventually, I've stared at my resume so many times I don't even see stuff anymore, so you put those blinders on. I think the big one for me, in addition to sort of some of that typos and things like that, is reading a biography. Is when people string paragraphs together, especially from an undergraduate resume, it's just, if I wanted to read the biography, I'm sure that 25 years from now there's going to be a great book out there, and I'm going to pick it up. But for now, now we're looking for something short, concise, to the point, that's going to give us the information we need and easy to find it. So really focusing on kind of that bullet-pointed resume is what I look for.
All right, Alice, you got one red flag?
I think it's going off the bullet points that it's listing. My big red flag is when engineers list every CS skill set they can think of under the sun. I think it's because traditionally they're thinking maybe some kind of robot is parsing these resumes. We review all resumes at Google by hand, so when I see a list of 25 words, it basically tells me I have no idea what this candidate's strengths actually are, right? He lists 10 languages, 15 operating systems, and a lot of jargon words like Agile and Scrum. What does he actually use on a daily basis? I have no idea, and if I can't tell in a quick glance, what are his top skills? What are the languages he actually uses in these projects? That's actually a negative. So I would actually, caution to not list, to only list things you've actually used. Right? No need for laundry lists.
Cool. All right, and now really, last question, I promise. This one comes from Kara, and Alice, this one's going to be pretty much for you and I, and I'm going to start it off because I haven't done one. And her question is, what if I haven't had substantial technical experience? Is there anything I can do to make my resume compelling enough for an interview? And I think that's a great question. It's a really hard question. For me, I think that goes back to detail in your resume, right? Like explaining in detail what you've done that's relevant to a technical interview so that I'm going to want to interview, and really pushing a little bit harder on that. I think the other thing that I think about is excitement, right? So you don't have to have a CS degree or all of these things, but if you're excited about the technology, you went out and you downloaded the Android SDK and you're learning how to hack on it and you're getting better at these kinds of things. Maybe that shows you haven't had all of the technical experience that we might expect, but you've got the passion and the fire in your belly to go learn that stuff, and maybe you're worth a chance. And I think that's the things that I would sort of recommend. I don't know if you've got anything else that you want to add to that.
I absolutely agree. I think it's showing us how many positive indicators that we can gather, right, from a quick look at your resume. A lot of new grads, quite frankly, will come into Google with resumes that almost literally have no internships, right, or work experience. All we know is they went to school somewhere, and they're getting some sort of relevant degree, and they're applying for a software role. So what makes us want to interview them? A lot of times it's how much detail they are listing in, that super heavy class project they participated in, or maybe there was a random hackathon at school. Maybe they participated in this weird contest online, right? And then there's a link to it. Any kind of indicator that basically tells us you've touched or are interested in messing around with software, I think is a positive thing. I don't think it's mandatory that every new grad at Google have, 3 internships, etc. Do a lot have them? Yes. Do I hire a lot of candidates with absolutely no work experience and who just, showed a lot of potential in the classroom, for example? Absolutely. So there is no tried and true formula, right? We hire bioinformatics guys and math majors and people, outside science sometimes, right, with random dual degrees in music. I think the most important thing is having touched software at some point and showing us that you have in any kind of capacity.
Right. Absolutely.
I just wanted to add a couple of things on that, because it's very similar on the non-engineering side too. At Google there are a lot of roles, everything from engineering roles, but also on the staffing programs, all those sales, marketing, finance, those groups that need some sort of that need a education, experience, all that kind of stuff, but maybe not an engineering degree. So, if you don't have that necessarily technical experience, there's a lot of roles out there. But Google also offers a lot of programs where you can get experience. Things like Summer of Code, Google Code Jam, but then also on the non-engineering side, there's the Google Online Marketing Challenge, opportunity where you can get AdWords money and go find a local business or something and start learning the system. So there's all these programs out there. Lots of companies offer them. It's a great way to get your foot in the door and learn some of these skill sets that you might not be able to get from maybe a professional experience, but you can do on your own. And taking that initiative is really, really important to people that are reviewing resumes and taking a look at them, because that shows an interest outside the classroom, something you're passionate about and excited about, and you've really gone to develop that on your own time. And I think that's just as important as maybe that professional experience or professional technical or professional advertising or anything like that sort of experience.
Awesome. Cool. Now, those are all really great tips. And we are now done. We're done. Just want to thank you guys in particular for joining the Hangout on the Air live, talking about resume prep. It's really exciting to be doing this for the first time, especially with you guys, which I know, which is awesome. And again, thank you. And for anybody out there listening that wants a little bit more of this, tomorrow at 1 o'clock Pacific, we'll be doing another Hangout on the Air, talking about technical interviewing and going a little bit deeper into the technology. So again, Brian, Alice, thank you guys so much, and anybody out there listening, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow, and maybe we'll have some time to take some live questions as well. And talk to you guys later. Thanks,
Jeff. It was great. Have a good one.
See you guys.